How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? Today is Friday, August the 2nd, 2013. Dick Bangs here in the studio at WCAT. Jim Aylward on my right, Dave Phipps on my left for another edition of We the People. You've heard us talk about a lot of things in the last couple of years that we've been on now, ladies and gentlemen. And not the least of which has been government intrusion. And I use the word intrusion. We've talked all about how there are so many rules and regulations. They tell us what to do, what time to get up practically, what time to go to bed, how to live our lives. But we have a classic example to point out government regulation, government intrusion, government control. And the title today is Woe to the City of Detroit. So gentlemen, why don't we start off on Detroit and let you, I know we've talked about this, ladies and gentlemen, my cohorts here. Who's going to kick off and give people what a background is, what we're talking about, the city of Detroit?
Well, look at Detroit in 1960. Detroit in 1960 was the #1 city in the United States of America. #1.
Okay.
I have to backtrack a little bit because you have brought out in the past that the United States, continuing the way it's going is going to be like Greece in 5 years. Well, you were wrong. It's going to be like Greece in 3 years.
We're already there.
Detroit is.
Yeah.
All right? You were very optimistic when you said 5 years.
Yeah.
But we're looking at the result of the government shutting the people out of the system and taking total control of the system. 1960, Detroit had 2 million people. It was booming. World War II was over. They were back producing automobiles. The unemployment rate was probably 2%. It was just producing massively. And everybody was buying everything. And what happened? The government took control of things. And again, as we've always said, they incrementally change things. They don't do anything massive all at once. As we've said in the past, the camel gets his nose under the tent, and little by little he enters into the tent until one day he's totally in the tent and anybody in the tent has been pushed out. Mm-hmm. Well, Detroit, #1 city in the United States of America, 1960, 2 million people. Today it's got 800,000 people. They lost 1,200,000 people in that period of time. And they went from #1 to last.
And they're now bankrupt.
They're now bankrupt. And any reasonable person should reflect on this and say, why was that allowed to happen? How did it happen? Well, as we have been stating for the last few years, as the government gets more and more involved, the government destroys more and more. And all the government does is force people into dependency. And when the people are forced into dependency, productivity goes down the tube. So you have a classic example looking at it right now. Detroit 1960, Detroit 2013. And we've been saying that this would happen for years. And it has happened to Detroit.
Give us some statistics.
Well,
on
here's
Detroit,
something
David.
that came up. It said in Detroit, only a third of its ambulances are in service. Police take 58 minutes to respond to emergency calls. That's a 911 call, not just hello, how you doing today? And there are 78,000 abandoned buildings. The average home price is $7,000. And I got something on the internet that showed some very, very attractive looking houses.
Single homes now.
Single family dwellings.
Yeah.
That in Winthrop, as far as I can see, would be $250,000 to $300,000. and their price range is $17,000 to $20,000 each. The bad side of that is that if you bought one for, say, $17,000, no matter what kind of condition it's in, you'd have to live in Detroit.
And I think the mantra of the real estate gurus is location, location,
Yeah,
location.
that's right.
That's it.
And so the house value is determined by the location.
Absolutely.
And what the value of the house is telling everybody is having this house in Detroit is not the best venue for that house.
Now, there are probably also a number of abandoned homes, though. People have gone, but
Well,
Jim's in the
there's
population.
78,000 abandoned buildings.
Okay, but in the meantime, those abandoned places, if you got one of those, then so no doubt the toilets have been stripped, the plumbing has been stripped, all the copper pipe and all of that. So you'd have to almost, by you buying or getting a shell, you have to rebuild the whole damn house.
Yeah, but even with that, were that house in Winthrop,
Yeah.
in the condition it is in Detroit, you would still it would still fetch
Be worth
over six figures.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that house in Winthrop, having the shell, you could go ahead and redo the entire interior, and now you'd have a $250,000 house.
True.
But if you did the complete interior in Detroit, you'd still have you spent $100,000 in the interior, you still have a $17,000 house.
That's true. And the other point is that if there's 78,000 abandoned buildings within the confines of Detroit, those people have gone somewhere. And the city of Detroit is probably sending a quarterly tax bill to them, but unfortunately they didn't leave a forwarding address, and they said, keep it.
Yeah, it's yours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
yeah.
for it.
Well, see, that brings up the other thing. When you go from 2 million to 800,000, there's a lot of productivity there that has been lost, so that the money collected in taxes with the exodus of people has plummeted.
Yeah.
And so with all of their trials and tribulations and problems, they have been compounded
Sure.
by the lack of taxes being paid from these 78,000 abandoned buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would suspect that the people who are living in some of those buildings are probably a few years behind in their taxes.
Yeah.
Yep, they may well be.
And as a result, Detroit can't pay its bills.
And those people that remain there of the 800,000 or whatever they are, I heard the other day over 40% are on food stamps or other forms of government assistance just to survive.
But there are no jobs in that kind of an environment.
No.
You can't find work, and the only place you can find a job is in government.
Right.
And government is broke.
Right?
True.
And government can't pay its own bills. And what is government trying to do now? Well, getting somebody else to come in and pay the bills. They're trying to get the federal government to pay the bills
Right.
for their mismanagement.
Yeah. And of course, the government employee, when I say government, not federal government, local government, but they have negotiated over the years very favorable union contracts with all of their municipal workers, if you will, and they said, whoa, we've got pensions that we're entitled to.
You mean
That-
those unfunded pensions?
So there's a big unfunded pension pile. So people said, you can't cut. You've made agreements in good faith. But I believe the bankruptcy judge is going to make another determination.
Well, he did.
We'll pay what we can pay, period.
Yeah, but you see, I'm not an expert, and in fact, I know very little about bankruptcy laws, but the little I have read in the paper is that there's a setup whereby each one knows where he is in the distribution of assets.
You mean the creditors? There's a list. And I think that starts off with the federal government, state government, local government first,
Okay.
before all the people, the bondholders and all that. They're tailing
That's the
Charlies now.
point I'm
Yeah.
getting at, is that there is, in that bankruptcy law that distributes assets, somebody comes in number one and somebody comes in number
Yeah.
last.
There's
Yeah.
a pecking order.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make. Yes, that's the
how the
word I'm
heck do
looking
we-
for. It's
how
a
do-
pecking order.
And of course, Detroit's the big example. We've already talked about California. 2 or 3 cities out there have already declared beforehand. Yep.
is one
And there
of
are others on the brink right now.
Yeah.
And how
And
do-
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Harrisburg,
That's right,
Pennsylvania.
Harris, the capital. Capital of Pennsylvania. How, people think Philadelphia is the capital. It's not, and we all know that. But you know, the thing is, how did we get there, fellas?
Well, how you got there, in my opinion, is a certain degree of arrogance, which is born of a bigger degree of ignorance, because all you hear about is unfunded pension liabilities.
Yep.
Well, both Jim and I were subject to withholding from a paycheck to provide a retirement.
Right.
Now, you may not have seen it. In my case, I know I didn't see it directly, therefore it was tax-free. But it was required that it would be placed in some kind of institution where it would grow. Interest would be paid. It is like any annuity. Government doesn't do that. The
Well,
Social Security
Some
system is.
in Massachusetts, as you know, firefighters, police officers, teachers contribute to the state pension. So
Yeah.
they pay a portion of it, which is unlike California. Remember that guy out there, the head of prisons or something, going to retire with a $176,000 a year pension? He never paid a nickel towards it. At least our people pay something towards it, okay?
Well, whether they pay something toward it or not, it is what do you do with it when you have the money? Do you sit there and put it in a pile? Now, I remember some guy named Gore who was talking about a Social Security lockbox because the Social Security started, what, 1932?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And at that point in time, the average life expectancy for a male was about 68 and for a female was about 71. We have added 15 years minimum to that.
Yeah.
And the only problem they had was that they were taking money from every working individual in the country and putting it in here, and the income was greater than the outgo. So, being governmentally involved, they couldn't stand to see a whole pile of money sitting around doing nothing. There must be something we can blow it away on.
That's what happens every time the government gets involved. Because going back to what you said about our pensions, I had a percentage of my income taken out each paycheck and put in my pension fund. And the airline pilots group to which I belonged hired 3 investment firms, each of whom managed 1/3 of the money that I actually put in.
Yes?
And every year we would reevaluate those 3 firms, and every once in a while we would change one that wasn't performing as well as the other 2, and we would put a new one in there. The point I'm getting at is we could see our money, the status of it, year after year after year. We knew it was worth $10 a share this year, and next year it was worth $11.02, and then next year it was well, whatever. But we could see what was going on, and the money was there. It wasn't promised.
Right.
It was actually there. And so when I retired, I knew precisely what I had.
And you know it was safeguarded because it was there.
It was there.
Wasn't used for
there
something
were no
else.
promises involved,
Right.
like you mentioned about these unfunded liabilities. They were all promises.
Right.
And those promises, a politician's promise, you know how
yeah.
reliable that is.
Well, the secondary thing, and there was an NGO, a non-governmental organization called the Pension Benefits Guarantee Corporation, which was a large insurance company which, for a fee from your pension and mine, would guarantee the results of the actuarial table would accrue to you and me and
Right.
any other person in there. Does any government agency do that? Heck no. Let's put it in a piggy bank for a couple of days and then we'll build something.
Yeah, but it's even worse than that, David. As you yourself brought out and Dick brought out in the past, it's unfunded.
Funded,
Yeah.
yes.
Unfunded. In simple terms, they don't put any money into the pension
No.
fund. They promise.
Yeah, but we'll
that
take
when
care
you-
of that tomorrow. Do you remember that phrase, tomorrow?
That's right. And the promise is that when you retire, they will get that money in there. And as a result, Detroit now, they don't have any money to pay their pensioners.
Right.
When you go from 2 million people to 800,000, the tax base and the revenue it takes a massive hit.
Yeah.
And that revenue that they were using as a projection when they were making all these promises with 2 million people has suffered tremendously now that they only have the 800,000. And there's no way that those people in retirement or about to go into retirement can receive the benefits that were promised them.
Who's going to bail them out?
They're trying to get you to bail them
Thanks
out
a lot.
and trying to get David to bail them out.
Yeah.
That-
Well,
that-
all right. So again, the thought process boggles our minds, ladies and gentlemen. But let's talk about something right in our own backyard. Lien tax went up 3 cents yesterday. Well, what's 3 cents? But the next day, the Department of Transportation says, we're going to need more money. The governor had some great plans to fix public transportation and all the infrastructure. So why don't we add to that normal increase of the gas tax this year? That'll save a little money and solve some problems. Why don't we do a couple of things? Get the gasoline tax rigged somewhere to the rate of inflation. In the meantime, let's put the toll booths back on the Tobin Bridge and on both ends of the tunnels. And then you say, whoa, where are we going?
Let's start with just that gas tax tied to inflation, and I think David
You had
made
a statement.
David-
Well,
The biggest thing is that we refer to things by